in this edition of Artistic Horizons. Designing retro video games.
There's some sort of self-expression aspect that comes along with interactive media because we all choose to experience it differently.
Telling a story through ceramics.
Combining my interest in illustration and ceramics is really my way of tying into that kind of narrative tradition of ceramics, but also things that are personal to me.
A jazz legend's love of music.
Success means you've accomplished something, But to me, it's something that I had to keep doing to survive.
A long-distance swimmer writes a memoir.
When I finished and put the last period on this book, I thought, I can't write this story any better than I've written it now.
It's all ahead on this edition of Artistic Horizons. Hello, I'm Mark Sonero, and this is Artistic Horizons. Milwaukee, Wisconsin musician Jordan B. Davis loves retro video games so much that he developed his own. Named after his band, Space Raft, the game stars Davis and his bandmates and features some of the notable people and places in the Milwaukee indie rock scene. Take a look.
Ready? Cool. I started my first band in high school called Mystery Girls from Green Bay. It was a garage rock band. Our first record came out when I was 19 or so. That kind of set me on my way. So I'm mostly a musician. That's kind of my main discipline. When I finally moved to Milwaukee in my 20s, I started a band called Space Raft. So Space Raft is a video game. It's an 8-bit NES game about my indie rock band. And basically it's a kind of adventure where you're following the band around trying to retrieve the stolen master tapes of the new record. Because it was my first video game, I decided to stick to what I know. Basically, every stage in the game is a different venue or establishment here in Milwaukee. Video games have overtaken every other sort of entertainment media. It's a form of empowerment, I think, when you're giving the player the tools to accomplish tasks and solve problems. That's something that we can all relate to. So I think that there's some sort of self-expression aspect that comes along with interactive media because we all choose to experience it differently. And I think there's something kind of profound about that. I felt a little intimidated by the visual aspect of this project when I got started. I hadn't done any visual art outside of random show posters in probably about 15, 20 years. The first thing that I actually ended up drawing was the front steps of the Cactus Club. I worked at Cactus Club for many years, so it was very much, it also lived down the street, so it was part of my neighborhood. I couldn't drive to the freeway without driving past it, so I was very, very intimate with the location. With tile-based 8-bit artwork, everything is representational. You're not doing one-for-one of anything. You're trying to represent your subject the best so that people interpret it the way that you want it to. And I think I got it pretty close. I think people that are familiar with Cactus Club, that have stood from that side of the street, crossed the street to look at it, will recognize it. Our ex-bass player, Serini, is a dear friend of mine. He volunteered to be the villain of the game. He volunteered the premise that he would have stolen the master tapes in a fit of jealousy, and that we're basically tracking him down, trying to retrieve the tapes and put the record out. So that involves going to shows and cleaning up after our ex-bass player. It's just a lot of antics, I guess you'd call them. I had very little idea of how much demand there would be for a new NES cartridge. It seemed funny to me to make something for outdated hardware. And the more that I kind of researched it, the more I realized that it wasn't irrational, and there was a lot of people out there that are interested in this stuff. I just think that, like, old technology, record players, cassette players, old game consoles, they all have value the same way that we would write a piece of music for a piano, which was invented in the 1700s. I have friends on every corner of the globe that are currently working with the console. It's really nice to have a sense of community with any creative endeavor that you go into. And game development can be an incredibly solo pursuit. You know, it's a lot of time spent alone with headphones on, poring over details that others may not find interesting. But to be able to relate those experiences to a broader community of developers and players and create this feedback loop, it's really satisfying. Finding connection with people and communicating intentions, I think that's what art is in general. Finding that through games is no less fulfilling than it is through painting or through playing guitar or through doing anything else that you might fill your days with.
And now for the Artist Quote of the Week. Through ceramics and illustration, interdisciplinary artist Holly Barrett tells stories. Whether it be a vessel or an installation, her work conveys narrative and evokes memory. We traveled to Cincinnati, Ohio to learn more.
Clay feels like nothing else. People say that clay has a memory. It remembers how you treat it, or the indents that you put into it will come back through a kiln. It's also the most community-oriented art that I've done so far. Painting and drawing, I can do anywhere. I can do it by myself. Clay really needs a group of people if you're firing kilns together or just constant feedback and lifting big 50-pound bags of material. I'm a multimedia artist working mostly in clay and illustrative installation. Currently a resident artist at Queen City Clay in Cincinnati and going to graduate school for ceramics. I started out in painting and drawing, doing a lot of illustrative ink work. I've always been drawn to buildings and clean lines and edges and three-dimensional things. And then when I went to university for a bachelor's in studio art, I took an intro to wheel and hand building class and just dove into it. And I really liked the tactile nature of it and how messy it was. I was really drawn to doing vases or things with lids that contain something, maybe contains a story. And that kind of pushed me to want to go bigger and bigger with these vases that could hold more imagery or a larger story that I could start to play with and mess with the way it was on a form versus just drawing one image on a smaller surface. So I started really thinking about pots as a canvas and how much canvas or surface I could get out of them. Growing up, I was homeschooled, so my mom read to us a lot as kids, and my dad is a writer, and I have parents who are editors and English teachers, and so language was really important to us, and folklore and stories growing up. And so a lot of my early work was based around that, and fairy tales and the act of storytelling and kind of those stories that we tell ourselves over and over again and the things that we hold on to. Part of the reason I'm interested in storytelling and started to do it on vessels is because you're working in the round. When you put a narrative on a pot, there's no clear beginning or end. It's just kind of this cycle, and you can choose where it starts or finishes or what pieces you focus on. Clay has such a fragile but also permanent nature that I think really ties into how we view stories and how they translate over time too. So combining my interest in illustration and ceramics is really my way of tying into that kind of narrative tradition of ceramics, but also things that are personal to me. I've gone from pots to doing more installation work recently, tile work and backsplashes. I've been doing the architectural door surround that's currently on the outside of Queen City Clay. That was 2,200 pounds of clay. It's a lot of surface. I'm also doing a wall right now for Queen City Clay that's specifically mine, and it's for the Queen City Clay community and tiles about their history and stories. So it's 9 by 12 feet of just fully illustrated tile work and columns. Porcelain is my favorite clay to use. I started using it my senior year of college against the advice of several people who said, you need more practice throwing before you should really use porcelain, but I also got a lot of encouragement from people who knew I was like, I want to try it. Because I think of clay as surface and I'm looking for that kind of monochromatic black and white, I like the natural background of porcelain rather than having to forcibly paint all of my pots white to start or anything like that. Last summer, 2023, I was nominated to be one of Ohio's emerging artists via the Ohio Craft Museum in Columbus. And then somehow through that, Donna Collins from the Ohio Arts Council put me forward, I think, or gave my name to Michael Reese, who is running this trip to Cuba. It's for the Havana Biennial or Biennale, which I didn't know anything about before this trip. There were maybe 12 to 15 artists from different mediums. I was the only ceramic artist. We went to different museums. I got to meet with the director of the Ceramics Museum of Havana, which is where my work will be once final things go through for the Biennale. We also went to Matanzas, which is a little drive east of Havana, where Manuel Hernandez and Lolo have a gallery out there. And so Manuel Hernandez is in his 90s, but he's a Cuban ceramicist, and his family works with him in Matanzas. Prior to going, I knew nothing about Cuban art, and I knew nothing about Manuel. I didn't even know his last name until we were there, so I couldn't find any information about him or what his art looked like. I just knew I was going to meet this famous Cuban ceramicist and have this experience of a different culture. He does more illustrative caricature and some comedic work. He used to be a cartoonist for a newspaper, and so that ties in. You can see the influence of it in his work. And that was exciting to me because I like the little bit of whimsy coming in. And so I introduced myself to him in bad Spanish, and somebody else helped facilitate a little bit. We had just been talking about doing vases and a couple of vessels to put in the museum, and he got excited and he took me out to see these murals that are tile murals on the sides of the buildings in Matanzas, and there are several spanned across the street. We were kind of just trying to translate for each other, and he expressed interest in doing one of those together. So that's how it got started, that we'll do pots for the museum, but tiles for Matanzas, just because it's something that we both love, is tile work. I'm making pots right now that Michael will take down to Cuba with him on his next trip, and Manuel will finish them. And then Manuel is currently working on about 36 tiles that he's starting and going to paint initially, and then I'll finish those once they come back here. We both really are interested in ideas of home and the places where people live and that kind of tradition and things that are important to us, and just the things that people hold on to no matter where they are. The biggest thing, especially as somebody working in clay, but just any type of art, is you don't want to be limited to any one thing or idea. I think it's why I was so drawn to being a multidisciplinary artist and doing clay and illustration and other types of work, is because you just start learning so much from each medium and how they can interact with another, and it just feeds itself and it feeds your own work and just keeps growing and growing as you find out how much there is that you don't know. And so it's that same thing going and interacting with other artists and other cultures, is you're reminded how much there is to learn and how much you don't know, and how we all have so many different experiences because of where we come from, but it's also fun to find those ones that are the same. Like Manuel and he's from Cuba and an older gentleman, and I'm 24 from Ohio, and we've had very similar priorities in family and home, and really we're able to bond over that. Cuba has really opened me up to how much I love collaboration, whether it's working on community projects or just working with another artist, to open that up a little bit, because you can have certain decisions that are just yours and then some that are just theirs and some that are shared. And I think the biggest advice is to find some connections, even just locally, just plug in somewhere, because even not ceramics, but just any art, if you're an artist, you can't do it alone. You need a support system or people who are gonna push you a little bit. Nobody's going to care as much about your art as you do, but it's helpful to find people who are gonna follow your work or just encourage you down the road or connect you with people they think might be interested in you and vice versa. That's what's kept me going, is just not feeling alone in it.
Now here's a look at this month's fun fact. For jazz legend John Lamb, age is just a number. Now in his 90s, he continues to play music in St. Petersburg, Florida, and shows no signs of slowing down. In this segment, we hear more about this talented bassist's illustrious career.
How did I get interested in music? Oh yeah, we had to go to church, and all the ladies and men were involved in singing every Sunday, and I was a kid sitting on the second row. And I learned from that how to get into the music and feel, I think. That's where it started. So after high school, I went into the military. They took me into the Air Force as a tuba player. I stayed in the military about 8 or 9 years and got out. That's when I met Duke Ellington.
John was a wonderful player and got recruited in the 60s to play for Duke Ellington. And he kind of thought Duke was a little bit over the hill at that point. He was more interested in Miles Davis. His wife said, take that gig. And it turned out to be the greatest gig of his life. They toured all over the world. They won Grammys.
When I first went, they said they were going overseas. I said, no, I can't. I don't want to do that. Then Mercer came and says, try it anyway. You might like it. So I continued on. I said, okay, I'll try it for a month. So I went over, sort of fell into the musician's habit.
He and Buster Cooper, who was a trombone player with Ellington at that same time, Buster moved here in St. Petersburg, and John and his wife followed. They were educators. John, in particular, I know, mentored a lot of the young jazz talent that we have here, and he continues to do that. John has got a real spark to him, and it's kind of hard to explain what that star quality is. He'll be out in the audience. He comes to a lot of music, and before long, they're going to have him on stage because, hey, John's here. Everyone's excited that he shows up. And I think it's that star quality that he brings and the presence that he has and the talent that he continues to show off to the world.
Well, I've known John for the better part of nearly 40 years. I took bass lessons when I got out of high school from him originally. That's how I met him. But over the years, we've worked together on the music scene, and musically, he's always been a huge inspiration. You know, playing with Duke Ellington, he learned all these great tricks over the years and fun things on stage. He'll come in here and say, hey, let's play something, you know, slow and melancholy, and he'll stomp it off. Other times, he's going to sit down at the piano with us and say, hey, let's play some blues and let's go. Everyone loves to play with John because they never know, like I said, what to expect. He can take that song and push it a certain way and make a singer or a trumpet player or whatever kind of follow his lead, and it's a fun time to watch that happen.
He has a strength still. He has a force. He has the ability, the knowledge. It's all there. It's all clear. And we're always happy to see him and have him join us on stage. He's kind of like this wise elder. If he feels like I need to hear it, he'll pull me aside. If I feel like I need something, I'll pull him aside. He's been a constant supporting figure, not only for me, but for a lot of local musicians. It's incredible.
But it's just more than just that knowledge. There's some people you can't talk to about education. They will never know what you're talking about. You have to be able to communicate it to them in a different way. And music taught me how to do that.
We've been celebrating his birthday since he turned 80. We did 80, we did 85, and the last one for 90, we had 600 people in the audience to see John perform. But what we really had was every jazz musician in the area wanted to be part of that show. And we had the best and the brightest, all who were influenced and loved John and were happy to be on the stage.
Success means you've accomplished something, you know. But to me, it's something that I had to keep doing to survive. I mean, I had enough to, you know, keep me going, but I wanted to survive. You know, I wasn't trying to get rich. I was already rich already from inside. It will always be there. It's a whole being. It's everything, man. You feel it. It's there. All you have to do is just tune in.
He's really been a great influence, not only in my life, but I know in so many other people's lives. He's always touched people, and I've never had somebody say anything bad. They've always said, John Lamb, oh, I love John Lamb. Everybody I know has said, I love John. So, I love John Lamb.
John's impact on this community is not that hard to measure. It's in every jazz performer that I know of. He's inside them because he's inspired them. And you're going to feel his legacy for decades to come because all these guys have learned from him and they're going to take that out into the world.
That's it.
And now, here's a look at a few notable dates in art history. On September 2nd, 2013, at the age of 64, Diana Nyad swam 111 miles from Cuba to Florida in 53 hours, a feat of perseverance that galvanized many. She wrote a memoir, Find a Way, the inspiring story of one woman's pursuit of a lifelong dream, which was adapted into a major Netflix film. We head to New York to find out more.
Endurance sports are different. You know, the extreme endurance sports are in different categories than most other sports. I can't say that an NFL player won't make it at the age of 60, but let's just say the chances are slim. It wasn't a physical impossibility to me when I started thinking of this childhood dream of mine, swimming from Cuba to Florida. I literally, at the age of 9, had the first glimpse of it within my imagination of it. So I had friends, Bonnie, other friends who said, you didn't make it at 28. What in the world makes you think at age 60 you're going to do this? But that was never daunting to me. I was fit. You don't like to have other people put limitations on you.
Nobody can tell us how far we can push the human body and or mind. And Diana has both. She's got the mind and she has the body to do it.
None of us know the power of the motion picture. Once it became a movie with the likes of Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, it went worldwide. It went more viral, my story.
Okay, just a little swim.
I'm just the type who's never happy. I look back and say, why didn't I do this more? Why didn't I do this better? But the truth is, this book, it's one of the few things I've done in my life that I had no second guessing, no regrets. When I finished and put the last period on this book, I thought, I can't write this story any better than I've written it now.
24-hour swims, 18, 17, 16. She did it. Listen, in the beginning, I was in it for the tan. And then it became my passion and my purpose.
We all get knocked down. It's part of the human condition. We have frailties. We have bad luck. We get knocked down, and it's the people who get back up and try again and again, who are resilient and persistent. Those are the people who get ahead.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Artistic Horizons. For more arts and culture, visit WPBSTV.org. Until next time, I'm Mark Sonero. Thanks for watching.